No, it's Monday evening, but today we're going to cover two very thick and very necessary topics: market fit and basic financials. And great thank you to our presenters, and Brian will tell a bit more about them. So thank you to our sponsors, Forster School of Business, for being a part of this hackathon and supporting us throughout. And thanks to our partners who also contributed to success. And as you all know, you're a part of those universities. Brian?
We have two presenters tonight, as Xenia mentioned. The way that the program is going to happen tonight, we have two different topics we're covering. We're going to cover market fit, and then we're going to cover basic finances. And we're going to cover market fit first with Jimmy Gia, who is managing director of the Gia Group here in the Seattle area. He will go over the basics of how that works conceptually, things that you should be paying attention to. And then our second presenter, Mike Waggoner, who is the CEO of the company that used to be called Grow Plastic, now called Coromat, will dive into how these concepts applied to his company, a very successful company, one that you should keep an eye on as an example of how to proceed in the startup world. And then each team, we've got one team that will be our guinea pig, Planet A. We're going to go into an exercise where we go over the market fit using their project as an example. And that each one of these will be about 15 minutes. And then we're going to cycle back and we're going to have Jimmy back in for basic financials. Mike will talk about Coromat, and then we'll go back to Planet A and go over their project. And we'll have time for questions for everybody at the end. And hopefully this will be a useful exercise so that you can see the basic information, a case study, and then a live coaching session for each topic. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Jimmy.
Cool. Thank you very much, Brian and Zena and Heather and everyone on the team to invite me to be part of this today. Let me just quickly share my screen. Can everyone see that? And, feel free to put notes into the chat box while we talk, raise your hands, whatever. I'm happy to go off script. This is not meant to be just a one-off talk. And if people force me to, I'm happy to just call on people as well. I do teach MBA, so that is something I'm comfortable with as well. To let me, a bit about myself, Brian introduced me. I've been in Seattle for a long time. And at the moment, I'm actually in between California, Seattle, and the UK, depending on the day of the week, which is really weird during COVID when you're not allowed to travel. And so most of my Zooms are actually on UK time right now, and then the evenings are California time. And so it does stretch my day quite a little bit. I worked in sustainable energy for a long time here in Seattle. I'm working on climate finance in London. And in California, I am on a board of an organization called Center for Sustainable Energy. And we deploy electric vehicle rebate programs across 5 or 6 different states at this point. Maybe we're up to 7 now. And so basically things around climate and sustainable energy as a very broad topic are the things that I work on. And I do have to say, and I think, Heather, you know this, waste is one of my favorite things to talk about. And so even though I'm not talking about waste today, this particular topic is one of my favorites. And so I'm very excited to hear what all of you guys are doing. A bit about, Brian already gave the agenda, market fit financial overview. So where my assumption is that many of you guys are at the beginnings of the formation of these companies that you're working on, and perhaps this is your first time through, maybe it's your second time or third time through this particular process. I've been an entrepreneur now for over 10 years, and I still diligently walk through these processes every time I try to start a new idea or a new project. And that's because no matter how much you think you know these concepts, it's always good to remind yourself because you'll forget a detail and you know that it's an important detail, and walking through carefully is very important. And so when we start thinking about the phases of a startup life, there's the search for the product market fit, which is what we're talking about today. And eventually you guys will work about creating the scalable and business model and the growth model. I think April's going to work on that with you guys, and then finally get to the scaling of the business. But if you notice, one thing I wanted to highlight in this graphic is the term search. Because when you're searching for a product market fit, or when you're searching for a repeatable and scalable business model, you're not going really fast. You might be going in circles, in fact, because you'll get a piece of new information that'll change something you learned yesterday, and all of a sudden you're going off in a different direction. And during that search period, it could feel very frustrating because you might not feel like you're making a lot of progress. But you have to keep in mind that during the search, it's kind of the walk before you run. The better you search, the better you know that your business model will work, the more you stress test it, the more you kick the tires and the tires survive, the faster you'll be able to run when you get to scaling the business. So even though some of these things might sound like, oh, I intellectually know the answer, I'm just going to move on. No, you really should spend the time, kick the tires a lot before moving on. And so what is a market? Generically speaking, it's a customer and a problem with a solution, right? So when you see that image, can you imagine right now who the customer is? Well, yeah, we probably all use this. Can you imagine the problem that this addresses? Chances are you probably don't think about the problem because we've been trained just to do this every day, at least once a day. But ultimately, what is the problem that this is trying to solve? Anyone want to popcorn out a couple of answers?
Tooth decay.
Tooth decay, yeah. What else?
Wasting toothpaste.
Wasting toothpaste. Yeah.
Yeah.
What else?
Packaging to the dentist.
Justine, what did you say?
Visits to the dentist.
Okay, preventing visits to the dentist. Nadia?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I thought we were talking about waste here. Sorry.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, what's the problem that this image solves?
Oh, what problem it solves?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. No, I take my hand back.
Okay.
I was talking about packaging. I thought we were talking about the packaging waste. And
No
yeah.
worries, no worries. The point I'm trying to make, and I'm drawing this out a little bit longer than we need to, is that in fact, we tend not to think of the problem. We tend to think of, hey, we got this really cool solution. It's called a new toothpaste. And just imagine what it would be if you try to come up with a new toothpaste. But maybe it's plaque, maybe it's cavities, maybe it's bad breath. You know, you brush your teeth before you go on a date, right? Maybe it's avoiding going to the dentist, but those are all very specific problems. And if you think about it, each one of those problems actually have multiple answers. If you have bad breath, you can go and get Listerine. You don't have to go brush your teeth. If you want to avoid going to the dentist, you can use toothpaste, you can use a water jet. There's lots of different ways to clean your teeth. And so when you put these together, what you have to understand is there's multiple customers, multiple problems, multiple solutions, but why is your solution so unique to solve that specific customer problem that that one customer has? And then that's what creates the market. This is something created by Strategizer, which is now quite commonly talked about. It's the value proposition canvas. And it specifically says that the value proposition in blue of your product and service that you're trying to sell has to match the customer profile. And one of the things that Strategizer does really, really well is they create these snapshots. I like to think of these canvases as snapshots that you are forced to fill in. And sometimes they might not seem very intuitive or they might not seem relevant, but if you can't fill in each one of these buckets, each one of these categories, you're probably overlooking something within your business process. So even if you're trying to sell something to reduce waste, well, there has to be a value proposition for the buyer. Otherwise, they won't part with their money. And so then what is that value proposition of your waste reduction innovation that will make the customer part with their money? And that's because of pains, gains, or customer jobs. And same thing on the value proposition side, you need to look at what it is you're offering and how much value it's creating in terms of the gains, or how much pain it's solving in terms of the relievers. And I think you might dive into this in a little bit more detail in a future conversation. But this looks kind of simple. It's just a square and a circle with a couple of different boxes. Why is it so hard? Well, we start with a target customer. This is kind of just a pyramid that you can see of the process of how to get to product market fit. Start with a target customer, and there's an underserved need. And then from the top, you have the products where you have the value proposition. That value proposition then becomes, in this case, it's UX, but UX is really any human interaction or customer interaction. And that product market fit is in putting your product on top of the market. The problem is most people don't know they have a problem. And so they don't know they have an underserved need. So the best case scenario is you go out there and someone does have a problem and you come up with something to specifically fit into that problem. But frequently that doesn't happen. How many of you have heard of Steve Jobs' quote way back when he first created the iPhone? Prior to the iPhone, how would he have innovated that? Because he basically took a phone and a camera and put them together. There was no one in the market who said they needed a camera phone. There were people who said they needed better phones. There were people who said they needed better cameras. But no one really said that there was a need for a camera phone. And so that was an underserved need that was actually not spoken. And somehow he was able to figure it out. How do you figure it out? It's not just one or two or three conversations with your friends. It's many hundreds of people to talk to really identify, oh, this new thing that doesn't exist yet is actually an underserved need. And if I create the product in this particular way, it's going to solve that specific need. So even though it sounds simple, the execution of it is incredibly difficult to do well. And that just goes to show, here's an expanded view of market research, what it means to go and look at that underserved need and how to talk to the many hundreds of people. You can do competitive analysis. You can identify trends in the market, look at customer feedback, so on and so forth, focus groups, surveys, this and that. Many, many different ways to be able to slice that customer need to understand where your product should fit. Have you guys seen the larger business model canvas yet in the curriculum?
They have not.
Okay, so the large business model canvas is 9 boxes, of which it's also by strategizer.com. And it is, again, a really good snapshot of understanding where your company is. And it basically asks 10 key questions. And you can find it online. It's called Business Model Canvas. There's many, many iterations of it on the internet. The thing I highlighted in blue is the value proposition. That holds the entire business model canvas together. And so that's what you're offering as a product. And everything in red is about customers, customer relationship, how you interact with the customers. The customer segment is how do you segment it out? Are you selling to elderly? Are you selling to students? Are you selling to males? Are you selling to this or that? How do you segment your customers so that you know exactly how to target that person? And then the channel, how do you reach them? Do you reach them via LinkedIn? Do you reach them via cold call? Do you tweet? Do you have to hire a sales force? Those 3 boxes are basically then your customer problem section. So everything that we talked about earlier with the value proposition canvas really fits into these 4 boxes right here of the larger business model canvas. Now, the bottom 2, cost structure and revenue stream, is what we'll talk about in the second session today, which is all about finance. And we're going to look at how we structure costs and how we make money. And then the key partners, key activities, and key resources are then the resources that you're bringing to the table to be able to execute everything on the business. And so what the business model canvas does is it gives you a very nice snapshot. And it's, again, something that you should go through diligently to be able to answer all of the questions. And if you don't know the answer to the question, you should get the answer to the question. And that gives you a holistic view of whether you've covered all of your bases in terms of trying to run through a startup, a company. So that's pretty much the summary that I have for today. Any questions for me at this point?
And just to let everybody know, we will definitely send out the links to a few of these images. You should have already actually received them in the mail that went out, email that went out today. And Jimmy, are you amenable to letting people have your deck too?
Oh yeah, please do. And I can send you this deck in a little bit as well.
Yeah, so we'll make that available to the teams. We'll host that and give everybody a link.
Looks like Ashley has a question.
Yes,
Yep.
Ashley.
Hi, Jimmy. I've had the business model canvas covered in a couple of my entrepreneurship classes so far in the MBA program I'm in. And as part of our customer validation process or customer searching process, I apologize if I'm using the wrong term, we were conducting a lot of customer interviews to identify some of those pains, gains, and jobs to be done. And I'm wondering if you have any suggestions for how other ways that we could go about identifying those same issues in this condensed amount of time that we have to work on this case competition.
Well, so yes and no. To do it properly, you need to talk to everyone. So the short answer is no. But you can always try to, I don't want to call them shortcuts, but think of it like trying to paint a picture with really big pixels, right? You can either go in with a really fine paintbrush and start in a very corner and start, with this cloud and just spend all of your 4 weeks up here, or you can spend your 4 weeks going, this is light blue, this is dark blue, this is yellow, and that's great. And you now have 4 really large pixels, right? And then once you have those large pixels, you can say, okay, I'm going to separate this now from blue and gray, and it's 2 different types of blue. And now I'm going to get 8 pixels. But each time what you're doing is you're going through the entire canvas, every iteration, right? And what I find, it's more useful to go through the iterations from really large pixels to more and more granular detail, rather than trying to say, hey, I'm going to get super, super clear on what that cloud looks like right there, and then waste all 4 weeks on just doing that little bit, right? So the short answer is you need to do it in that detail that you're talking about, but given the time constraints, you still want to try to paint as best of the picture as you can so you kind of know your bases are covered. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yes, that was helpful.
Great. Who else?
All right. I'm not seeing any other hands.
Oh, I had a quick question.
Sure.
There we go.
So I'm kind of new to entrepreneurship, so apologies if this is kind of a naive question, but I was wondering how we should do market research considering the online environment we're in. Like usually I would think of maybe going to clubs or, RSOs that are associated with the issue we're trying to solve and like getting feedback from them. But I was wondering if you had any advice for like just reaching out virtually or trying to find that market.
Could you give me a 15-30-second pitch of what it is that you're doing?
Oh, sure. So we're not totally solid on our idea yet, but we want to solve the issue of wish cycling, which is when people, hope that what they're recycling is recyclable, but it ends out not to be. So we want to create a service that either helps people identify what is recyclable or not, or maybe we can help bring them supplies that will help them with wish cycling, like maybe bins or something. It's not totally laid out yet. That's kind of the issue we want to solve.
Yeah. You know, I would encourage you to try to just reach out to people you know and and ask them for their referrals,
Okay.
and kind of grow it out organically that way. You're basically just asking for people's time. You're not asking to do this market survey. You're asking people's time. You're not asking for their money. And so you can start. And it also sounds like you're going to be having one-on-one conversations with people, instead of doing like mass surveys, which have their benefits as well as their, landmines. So I would just basically start with your friends. It is a lot of effort to go out there and be social. And I don't know if you're in, this does get a little bit into, extroverts and introverts. If you're an extrovert, it might come more naturally. If you're an introvert, you just have to be more disciplined to get it done. It's more like having a goal of, I got to talk to 50 people. Well, you just have to go and talk to 50 people, and then you sleep for 24 hours. But you have to set it as a goal of a task to accomplish instead of just oh, it doesn't come naturally to me, I'm not going to do it. Does that make sense?
Got it. Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, I think we'll hand over to Mike Waggoner now, who will tell us about how this all applies to Karmets, how it worked for them.
Let me,
Ooh, good background.
thank you.
Like that.
Let's see. All right.
There it is.
Sweet. Yeah. So yeah, there's the business model canvas. And so I've been at this really probably like for 20 years in one form or another since I did a master's at the University of Washington. And I'm a looks like my slide timings are on. Just one sec. Sorry about that. Okay, so a lot of this has been just kind of, hook and crook. I'm an engineer by education. Tried to stay on the technical side of things, but kind of got pulled into selling things and raising money and then running a company over time, just because I want things to happen. And so this will be my journey, like finding partners, figuring out what we had to do, establishing relationships, and pushing things forward. So I think that, one of the most important things for financing is looking at, is there a business here? And the traditional thing and a lot of what they tell scientists or even students is, this kind of map where it's, team formation, a lot of business model canvas, talking through things, and then customer discovery. And what I would say is probably most important from what I've learned is actually, customer discovery. Just move it up in the front as early as you can. And, that's dead important, because if you talk to your friends, if you talk to people if you talk to environmentalists, they're going to be really excited about what you're doing. And that's a limited part of the market. And so, if you want a niche industry or a lifestyle industry or, something that makes you feel good, like, if you just want to do that, like that's great. But if you really want to make a huge impact in the world, it's like talking to people who disagree with you, who are the entrenched folks, and trying to figure out how to convince them over time. And so that's where I look at, like, how will you convince not just, the initial fans of what you're doing, but also other folks, and, get the world to change over time is a lot of what you're trying to do. And the other thing that's really important in all this is just, Googling it. So, if you have for instance, a service where you want to help people not recycle things incorrectly, there are a number of people working in that area, like the Sustainable Packaging Coalition, Walmart, various automatic sorting systems. And I think that, like one of the most important things you can do is really just do a Google search along with all these customer interviews, and then figure out who made it and then copy what they did and then figure out who didn't make it, why they didn't make it, and then how to fix what they did wrong. And the other thing that I think you need to get comfortable for is asking people for money. It sucks, it's hard, it's weird, but it's also like the only thing that I found really like it's a way to turn out like whether or not someone's a credible partner. I do a lot of corporate business development with folks, and the most important thing is to just ask people for money absolutely as certain as possible. Like just, like day one with a corporation, say like, here's what we want to do. Like, what sort of budgets do you have for this project? Just because if their answer is 0, or if the person that you're talking to doesn't have any idea what the budget could be, they'll keep taking your calls, but they may never be able to give you money. And that's what you have to do as a business person, is get money from them. So what we do as a business is that we make lightweight materials for the circular economy. And more specifically, what that means is that we can take pretty much any plastic, so that's what most packaging is made out of, and then make this patented structure out of it. And so we use high pressure carbon dioxide to make this very lightweight structure. And because it's lightweight, that means it's cheap. And in terms of environmentalists, people love that we're making compostable packaging that can displace, traditional packaging. But what I think is going to let us change the world is that what we make is very cheap to make. And so people will buy it because it's lower cost than the alternatives. And that's what's going to help us enable our company's mission. So I've been at this for a long time and raised a bit north of $5 million worth of grants and a couple million in investor money. And so I've done projects in like sporting goods, airplane parts, medical materials, a couple different areas of food packaging. And we've ended up focusing on food packaging, and most specifically on a niche. And the reason for that is that if you go after a huge commodity market from day one, it's very hard because you're competing against very large entrenched companies. Versus if you're going after a tiny niche, quite often it's small companies you're competing with. Quite often you're dealing with small businesses that buy things. And so, they're willing to change. Trying to go after whales or big customers is like a 2-year process. So if you can find the type of business where it's a huge opportunity, but there's this tiny niche you can attack, that's going to make your life a lot easier. And the real thing that motivates me in all this is that I'm a pretty passionate outdoorsman. Climbed and skied down a lot of the mountains around here, mountain bike a lot. And I'd like to fix the world's 2 biggest problems. And one of them is ocean plastics. And that results because people without clean water, without toilets, without any waste infrastructure, throw plastic on the ground and into rivers, and then it flows out in the oceans. That's where most ocean plastics come from, in my opinion. And then food waste rotting into landfills is about 5% of climate change. And so those 2 things result because of basically economics. It doesn't make economic sense to fix those problems. And we think we can make money doing it. And so we think we can actually make a dent in these problems. So the value proposition for people who buy our packaging is that it's lightweight and hence lower in cost than petroleum-based packaging. It's compostable and made from food waste. And so our value proposition isn't actually that we make a greener product. It's that the people who buy food service products, that their customers know that they're doing something right for the environment, so they may choose their restaurant instead of, a different one. And so it's not doing the right thing. It's convincing someone else customers that, the middleman in the situation is doing the right thing. Everything we make is strong, and everything we're making is insulating. So it's basically like this strong, lightweight, high performance product that's going to save the world. The way that we work is that we add machines to existing factories. So there are thousands of plastic converting facilities all around the world. They have plastic sheet extruders, they have forming machines, and we add a machine in the middle that enables lower cost, better performing products. And we have shown that first in a warehouse in Bothell in Washington State. And then I convinced the USDA to give me a lab in Berkeley for about 3 years. And that saved me about 20 million bucks from having to build my own facility. And being in that facility convinced a fast food chain to give me money, which helped me get more grant money, which was nice. And it also convinced a major regional manufacturer to let me my first commercial machine into their facility. And so we're currently running at commercial or at pilot scale down in Southern California. And then we're actively working to upgrade it by Q1 of 2021, so pretty dang soon. So there's the market fit team exercise.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. That is great. That's really inspiring. And there's an example for everybody of where you can go with your idea. Okay, so the team that agreed to be our guinea pig tonight is Planet A. And that's Nydia. I have to change my view here so I can see all of you guys.
Here.
There you are. You're already unmuted. Perfect. All right. And their idea, well, why don't I have you tell everybody about your idea?
Okay. So when I tell my idea, I like to tell the backstory because it helps people understand a little bit where the idea came from. So I was living in Italy, and as everyone knows, COVID hit Italy pretty bad in the beginning. And I was visiting my partner in London, and Italy went on a lockdown, like a full lockdown. I was with a weekender back, and decided to go to India where my family is. So I had to do a lot of shopping, as you can imagine, because you can't just like stay with 2 pairs of clothing. And I was trying to be sustainable because that was like the first time where I had to buy a lot of things in a short period of time. And I found it really hard to find sustainable clothing. But like the more and more I research, the more I research on the materials, what materials are sustainable, what companies are doing it well. I figured there were a lot of options out there. They were just really hard to find, whether it was in India or in London, whatever. So that's where I decided, not like this, I'm not sure whether I'll actually run with the idea. I thought that this should change. If someone is trying to be sustainable, it shouldn't be so hard for them to do that. And that's when I thought that there should be, maybe I could try to create a platform where all the sustainable companies can come together and just like, so we have all the sustainable brands together at one platform, and I could start with clothing or shoes, etc. And it could just like expand to multiple products, expand, basically becoming Amazon for sustainable products. And yeah, I mean, I thought there could be various stages to how I do it. The first stage could be just like bring together all brands that are exclusively sustainable, and just like have it on the website, and then add other brands like Zara or Chanel, etc., that are not exclusively sustainable, but they have a certain category to it that's more sustainable. So just like expand the universe like that. So there were various stages I thought I could lead the idea in, like look into supply chain, actually calculate the emissions of different products, suggest alternatives. If someone is looking at a white t-shirt in Seattle and likes this particular t-shirt, but is actually produced in Ohio, maybe on the side there's a pop-up which says, oh, you can actually buy the same t-shirt and it was produced in Seattle. So you reduce the supply chain emissions. So there is a lot of research that could go into it, and the website could like just really develop further. But yeah, the start would be just to bring together a lot of these brands so that it is easier for people to just buy these things. Yeah.
Okay. And so the short version of that is create a platform that brings together all of sustainable clothing. Did I get that right? That was what I had for you.
Sort of. That's where I would start. Yeah.
So I'm Jimmy and Mike, would love your feedback on this, but it feels like the best thing to do here might be to dive into the value proposition.
I mean, so I actually heard a couple of different business models there where really there was one having, you know, like kind of the sustainable, the Amazon of sustainable fashion. But then there was also talk about, you know, kind of setting up a life cycle analysis for fashion, and then also a comparison tool. And so like this is kind of jumping ahead in my slides, but one of the things that I really point out is that like the most important thing is like, why are you doing this? And it's, you know, if it's because you really are driven to build the next sustainable Amazon, then that's, you know, that's one business model. But it's like, maybe you search around for a while and there really is no good life cycle analysis for fashion. And you could set up a consultancy for fashion brands to do LCAs for them, and then make a website that just like ranks them. And then, you know, and then maybe if you're interested in exit, then maybe your goal is to sell out to Amazon, so that then Amazon can have this little score blurb on the, you know, the corner of their website or something. Or maybe you're doing like an add-on, you know, like just a little plugin for Google. And so, you know, I would say it's, yeah, it's not necessarily like building a website, you know, it's that, you know, your goal is to minimize the impact of fashion. And there are, you know, and you just have to figure out how to make money from that and figure out how to do what makes you happy.
Yeah, so I actually read that fashion industry is responsible for some of the highest carbon emissions, actually the second highest after oil and gas. And to reduce that, you need to have a larger impact. And to be able to do that, I think it's important that we give people a choice to be able to do it easily. So there are a lot of companies out there that produce sustainable clothing, and they all have consultants to help them do that, but they haven't done it at a large scale. And fast fashion is just so popular right now. So it is a lot about changing habits. The way I am thinking of it is to start with people who actually care already and maybe are trying to be sustainable, but just like find that it's just high time investment to be able to find these brands. I am one of those people. Like I am a very involved consumer who just like spends 2 hours looking for one particular thing because I have trying to find it sustainable, but it's just like so hard to do it. And and there are so many people I know who want to buy sustainable, just not willing to spend the time to be able to do it. So just like, I think it's useful to just have this platform, and I'm pretty sure Amazon is better positioned to do it than I am, except that they're not doing it, which is the problem. Yeah.
So what I would recommend is you're struggling to define, formally vocalize the question or the problem statement. The question statement is very amorphous, is what I mean. That you have a problem, you've identified a problem, but you're talking around the edges of the problem, because you're describing the properties that the problem has. But at the core of it was your origin story of the problem, the struggles that you have in doing what it is that you want to do. And so that's a market of 1, which is better than a market of 0. And so you can start this by trying to find out, well, how many other people share this problem? And if you can find other people that share this problem, then you're starting to build the market. You're starting to identify what that underserved market is, right? And so what that can do is help you strengthen the problem statement that you're kind of talking around. You know, like what Michael said, is it the database? Is it the sales? Is it like there's a couple of different ideas of how you can execute this kind of amorphous feeling that you have of something's wrong. So what I would recommend is you kind of have a beginning. Now you need to really hone it. And if you can spend the next couple of weeks just making that really crisp into this is the problem statement, this is the value proposition I have to this problem statement, that would be really, really helpful.
Okay, that makes sense. I have a question. So, so the way I talked about it was that I was telling you what the long-term vision along with the short-term vision is. So when you're saying this value proposition, are you talking about more like the short-term vision you have? Because like the short-term thought that I have is to just like bring together a lot of fully sustainably focused brands and give them a platform so that it's just easier for people to find them. That's the short-term proposition. Like this is all just like bring together these brands, put them on one platform, and make it easier for people to buy it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that I would answer that, and Michael might have a different opinion about, and this is where you get divergent opinions, which is great because it means that no one's right and no one's wrong. So I could say whatever I want. No, but what I would say is I would ask which one of those stories resonates with your customer base. That's the one you should go with. Do your customers, are they attracted to the grand scale vision of what it is that you're doing, or are your potential customers attracted to the short-term need? That's what you go with. It's not so much what you want to do, it's you have to satisfy customer need.
That makes sense. Okay, so I have to basically understand the market itself better, which would involve a lot of research, potentially involving certain sort of investments. And I was wondering whether it was worth making those investments instead of just like putting it in the product itself.
What do you mean by making investments?
Because so how would you understand your market? I'm sitting here in Seattle. This is more like a global idea and maybe starts with Seattle. My market are people who are interested in sustainability. That's who I'm looking forward to market this product to. And if I want to do this research, it requires certain time investment, certain money investment. And do you think just figuring out what people want is an important investment to make instead of just like building the product itself?
Well, it depends. I mean, if you build the product, then you're treating with the philosophy of build it and they will come. What if they don't come?
That makes sense.
So this is where you have to balance the risk. Are you willing to risk build it and they will come? Or are you willing to risk, I'm going to spend my time researching and put my investments and put my time and energy into that?
Ooh.
You see?
And with those words of wisdom, we will call time on this piece. It's always too short, but yeah, it's a quick sprint, this hackathon. We'll move on to the basic financials. Thank you, Needy. Do you want to dive into the basic finance portion of it, or do you think that you want to back up a little bit and go over some of the things that they coached you on for the next section?
Are you asking me, or are you?
Yeah, I'm asking you if you feel like you're ready for the next.
I don't think I know the financials so well just yet, but we can maybe briefly touch on it in the sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We might come back to you. We might go to another team. There are a couple other teams that have expressed interest. Okay, so we're going to move on. And Jimmy, it's back to you with the basic financials.
All right. Hold on one moment. Let me share screen again. So I kind of prepared this section of the talk without really knowing how much financial background everyone has in the room. And so in some ways it might be too basic, in some ways it might be too advanced. If you're comfortable with numbers, this might be super easy. If you get an allergic reaction with a plus sign or a multiplication symbol, then just tell me to slow down and I can certainly do that. When I did my MBA, one of the student groups formed accounting for poets, for people who absolutely never touched Excel before in their lives. And they put together a study group to be able to work their way through that. So, what I'm going to talk about is the basics. And I really just want to start out conceptually, first of all, which is a question. Assume there's 4 restaurants and one restaurant has $1,000 in cash. The second one has $1,000 of kitchen equipment. Another one, $1,000 of groceries. Another one, $1,000 in the buffet line, ready for the lunchtime rush. Which one of these 4 restaurants is better off? What do you think?
Boy, I have to go with buffet. Why? But I think it's because I failed to eat dinner before we got going. Well, because that's your business. I mean, that's money you can sell. You can't do anything with the other stuff.
Yeah, as an entrepreneur, I'll go with cash.
You want the cash.
We'll go with cash.
Yeah, I'll take the cash in a second.
Oh, interesting.
Any
Yeah.
other questions?
I mean, I'd say groceries. I'm not sure.
Why groceries? Why? What's making you say that?
Well, I mean, with the groceries, they can actually make the food. So, well, more food.
That's right. The point is, I'm trying to demonstrate that $1,000 doesn't equal $1,000. And each one of these $1,000 has other attributes behind it that are really just kind of assumed and we don't really talk about. The $1,000 in cash, as Mike said, it's purely liquid. You can spend it on anything you need. Maybe you have a fridge full of food, but you really need a new air conditioner. Well, you as a restaurant, you can now go and buy that air conditioner. But that buffet line, that's a sunk cost. I've already cooked that meal. It's sitting there. What if it's a rainy day and there's no customers? That $1,000 isn't turning into $1,000 anymore, right? And same thing with the, as Mia pointed out with the groceries. Hey, maybe I have a run on salmon, and maybe if I have it in the freezer or the refrigerator, I can pull it out and respond to the need of my customers as they're coming in and out. But what this points to is that money, when we start talking about finance, depends on time. And it depends on when you spent your money, such as the stove could have been purchased 10 years ago and you're still using it. And you know you don't have to buy a new stove for another 10 years because that stove's $1,000 right now. And you might not have that $1,000 in your pocket, in cash. But it's also the duration of how long you can use it. That buffet can only last you maybe an hour, but that kitchen stove is going to be there for another 10 years. So the value of $1,000 is actually quite difficult to measure. And so the concepts of finance is really based in trying to reconcile what do I have, but then also when did I buy it and how long does it last for? And when you put the time element in, it gets really complicated really quickly. When we're talking about fast fashion, we're talking about things in a couple of weeks, really, really quickly. But if you're trying to, Mike, you're selling disposable plastics, you might make a capital sale for a 6-month contract or something like that. And that's a completely different sales cycle with a completely different set of financials to track that purchase. So that's why we have these statements. But now why 3 statements? Why not just 1 statement? Can't I just keep track of like a checkbook of money coming in and out? Turns out to be a bit more complicated than that. Let's start with the balance sheet. And for you guys as entrepreneurs, your most important statement is the income statement. But in order to understand the income statement, we have to start with the balance sheet. The balance sheet is in balance, as you can see with these 3 boxes. On the left-hand side, you have the assets, and on the right-hand side, you have liabilities plus equity. Okay. The assets, shorthand, is what you own. The liabilities, shorthand, is what you owe. So one is what I have, and one is what I am obligated to give away. Now, obviously, you want your liabilities to be smaller than your assets. And if your liabilities are smaller, the residual of the math, and it is a purely mathematical calculation, the residuals of assets minus liabilities is equity, and it's the wealth that is left over from your company. Okay, so one of the attributes of a balance sheet is that it's a snapshot in time, meaning I can tell you what my balance sheet is today, and I can tell you what my balance sheet is next month. But both of them are snapshots of what do I own, what do I owe, and how much is left over. So then what's the income statement and the cash flow? Well, it's basically the delta, the change of 2 balance sheets. And the income statement and cash flow are both defined as changes between 2 balance sheets. Why do we have 2 of them? Well, the cash flow statement is a change between the cash And an income statement tells you the change with all of the activities you took between two different balance sheets. If you want to get into more detail about this, you should take an accounting class. But this is kind of the high level I want to leave you with of why you have three statements. Now let's dive into the income statement in a lot more detail because that's what you'll be dealing with. Generally speaking, an income statement is broken up into these categories. And there's a couple of other categories that we're not going to talk about. But the important ones to you in terms of just understanding a financial snapshot is the top line is called revenue because it's the first thing that comes into an income statement. It's also called a P&L or profit and loss. You might hear of it within the entrepreneurial context as a pro forma, but they all mean the same thing. They all mean this model that you see right here. You start with the top line, which is the revenue. And the first thing you subtract from revenue is something called cost of goods sold. So what is cost of goods sold? It's basically the incremental cost of every product that you sold in terms of the revenue. So let's say, when I was a kid, when I was like, 6 years old, 7 years old, when you don't have that much pocket money, right? One of the easiest ways to make some money was just to go and pick up cans of bottles of aluminum and then just give them back to and when you're 5 years old, a nickel is a lot of money and it was so much fun. And I would make my mom drive me to the park at like 6 in the morning so I can go pick up all the cans. My mom let me keep all the money. And I loved it because you know what? My revenue was like $3 a day and it was fantastic. And then, we'd go to McDonald's for breakfast and we'd just call it a Saturday morning and go home, right? Well, the problem was, if you think about it, is that $3 that I earned collecting recycled cans profit or was that revenue? Well, there actually was no cost of goods because you can't really attribute a specific cost to that specific can. But what you can attribute are operating expenses. Generally speaking, operating expenses will be sales and marketing, research and development, product development, everything else that's basically a fixed cost or harder to attribute to a specific thing. So the fact that my mom had to drive me to the park, the fact that I had to spend a couple of hours containing cans, the fact we went to McDonald's afterwards to get breakfast. And hey, if I was, an entrepreneur, I'd probably try to bring some of my friends along, right? Those are all costs that are embedded into running the business that can't be attributed to that specific action. And so then when you take your revenue and you subtract your cost of goods sold, sometimes just called COGS, you get your gross profit, and that's your first profit line. And then you have to subtract from that your operating expenses, and I list a couple of them there, and that gets you to your net profit. Accounting will call it EBITDA, which stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Again, that gets very technical into the accounting side. And then well below that, then you finally get to your net earnings or your net income. But net profit is what most of you guys will be worried about. And as you're thinking about your companies and as you're thinking about your business models, financial models, think about your revenue line, how much you think you can be making, but think about your expenses in two categories. The expenses that are per unit to what it is you're trying to sell, and your expenses of just maintaining your operations and maintaining your business running. And so a couple of just quick back of the envelope calculation things. When you're thinking about your costs, number one, always be conservative. It will always cost more than you think. Your numbers might turn out to be absolutely fantastic. And people who look at those financial models, they'll just add 30 to 40%, if not higher. And so you want to be conservative, and no matter how conservative you are, other people will still add probably 30, 40%. And you can try to make your numbers seem more realistic by doing both a grounds up and a top down approach. When you do the ground up, you're really looking at your unit cost of, hey, if I'm out there, picking up aluminum cans, how many cans can I pick up per minute? What's my fixed, what are all of my fixed costs of how far did I drive from my home to the park? And okay, if I did this every single day for 3 weeks, what would that cost me? That's grounds up, being as granular as you can. Doing top down is then going the other way around. It's looking at the market and saying, okay, if I think I can tackle this, $5 million market, how many people do I need to get there? Okay, maybe I need 10 salespeople. Okay, they're making, $70,000 each. Okay, and then you keep subtracting down, and you want to try to make your two models meet in the middle. And that's how you can guess and check yourself to make sure you're doing it appropriately. This is just some information about me. I know Brian will be sending it out around, but any questions about the financials from this segment?
I think they're all overwhelmed.
I was gonna
and
ask,
that's, there you go.
like if we wanted to like learn more, because like half of the stuff I've never heard of before, like what resources and stuff would you recommend that we like go to like figure this stuff out?
I would, Investopedia is a great place to start to kind of get a sense of what these terms mean. The business model canvas by Strategizer, they do get into some of these concepts as well. One of my favorite books ever is Accounting from a Lemonade Stand. And if you've never done accounting before, it walks you through a balance sheet, income statement, and cash flow statement through the premise of you're a first grader trying to start a lemonade stand. And so your cost of goods is your sugar, your lemon, and then you have some fixed costs, which is the pitcher that you borrowed from the kitchen, and your parents are making you pay rent because you're using the garage or something like that. And oh, hey, you're now doing so well, you need to buy 100 lemons, so you go down to the grocery store and you negotiate to buy on credit. And it really shows you how you can put those costs all through all of your finances. And it's one of the best books because it's also drawn in crayon. So it's really accessible. And for people who are going through finance the first time, I really recommend that book.
Yeah, I'd say like as another approach to it is that while you're searching for a business model, a lot of your job is just not going broke. And so really just like figuring out a way to make money on a unit basis is incredibly vital. And so I think that it is very useful to have a knowledge of income statements, balance sheets, P&L, and all those sorts of things. But like really just figuring out how you're going to make money like day in, day out is, I'd say, another thing to focus on, especially where you're at. Like you can spend a lot of time building out all these models, and if you don't have a realistic monetization strategy, then it can you can spend your time in the wrong area.
Yeah, I mean, from an operations point of view, as an entrepreneur, you're running by how much cash you have in the bank. Doesn't matter what your spreadsheet tells you. When you're going out for investors, the investors are going to want to say, "Hey, what's your spreadsheet? Show me your 5-year forecast into the future." And that's when you have to start being very familiar with this language. But yeah, from Mike's perspective, which I totally agree with, if you're getting your company off the ground, how much cash is in the bank is basically what you're operating against.
Thank you.
Good stuff. And to remind guys, we shot you a bunch of links to resources in today's message. And I'm going to lobby again for everybody here to check out the Next Step podcast and book series by Looney Libes. And that link, that information is in your orientation doc. And he has in particular 2 really good episodes. He's got good episodes about market fit, and he has 2 different episodes back to back on penciling out, which is really the core, the simplest, most initial part of financials that you're going to all have to deal with. Because the question you need to answer for yourselves right now is this idea something that can ever work? Can it ever pay money? Can it ever be sustainable? And if that answer is no, you want to find that out as quickly as possible, and then find out the new idea that's yes. Hopefully all of your ideas are yes right now. Okay, great. Mike, we are over to you again.
Okay, cool. Let's see. So I actually think like probably starting on this slide is probably most relevant for where the conversation is. And so what we've done as a business is, progress. And there's this low spot here in the time graph, which is called the valley of death. And if you look at the profit graph on the left, that's, where am I making money? And so what I thought would be helpful is actually to kind of like talk through of how we got to where we are, which is we're at kind of like the launch stage, if you will. And so I've been at this for 7 years with this company, but I did a master's in this technology like 20 years ago, and I was part of another startup for 5 years. So, like you can look at the timeline of 5 years or 7 years or 20 years or whatnot. And so where it seems like most of your businesses are is that you're at the exploration concept. And if you're a student, if you have a rich spouse, if you are independently wealthy, you can explore indefinitely. And that's pretty cool. And when I was doing this, I was doing it by buying stuff, and I was a full-time engineer. And then I was fortunate to win an EPA grant because our technology can help reduce emissions of packaging by using a third of the material and using a lower emission substrate. And there are, SBIR grants, there are foundational funds, there are contests. You can hide in school as a grad student, all sorts of ways to kind of extend the validation stage. And then when we ran out of EPA money, we were successful in getting a little more angel money. And so that helped us to build a pilot line. And then when we started to run out of money from angel funds, then we were fortunate to get USDA and NSF grants. And then all through this time, I was talking to a lot of people. And so I think this was about 4 years ago. And probably at that point, I'd probably talked to about 2,000 or 3,000 people in sustainable packaging, just to really validate that we had a product that people wanted. And I found the USDA and they offered me a lab in Berkeley, but I was still kind of on the fence. And then I got hit by a car. And that gave me 2 years of salary cushion as an engineer, and that enabled me to move my family down to Berkeley, California with the USDA. And it's a rough way to raise money, but it's another way to get money. And so then we were down in a commercial facility, and that helped us get about 2 million in angel funds, and unlocked about another 3 million in grants. And that got us to basically like almost a commercial scale, and we hope to be in commercial scale soon. And then past that, we were able to secure recently a USDA loan. And so since I was in a USDA facility and I got the USDA to give me money, the USDA likes me. And so they've got a program for biorefineries. And I was able to convince them, because I take the output of biorefineries and I make packaging out of it that's compostable, that I'm an eligible technology. And so we were able to get a loan guarantee so we can scale to fully industrial scale with less investor style money. And then, I've been thinking about exits. And one strategy for us is that we do lightweight materials. And so we could actually sell off the rights to technology verticals for things like, just sporting goods. We could sell that to a sporting goods company, or for aerospace materials, we could sell that to an aerospace company. And so perhaps the way to fund what my mission is, which is getting rid of plastic waste, is to, sell off segments of markets to other businesses. And then there's an abbreviation called a SPAC, and that's a special purpose acquisition company. And right now in clean tech, there are a couple of people who have founded what they call blank check companies. And basically it's a bunch of rich folks that got together, formed a company with no purpose, and then they want to partner with a growth stage company, which is where we hope to be in a year, and then, you know, form a almost an IPO, except for you don't have to go through quite as much rigmarole to get all the public market money for it. So in terms of, you know, like where you are right now, you know, raising money before you've proven market fit is really hard. And so, you know, Apple was founded by HP engineers. Instagram was founded part-time by consultants. And, you know, HubSpot, which is now an effective large marketing tool, was also founded part-time while market fit was developed. So, you know, there are all sorts of entrepreneurial strategies that you can do, but the side hustle is one of the best ones in the near term while you're trying to figure out how to make money. Also, the SBIR and the STTR funding mechanisms are really helpful if there's any science bent to what you're doing. And even if there isn't, sometimes you can convince them that there is. And the SBIR means you're a small business trying to do research. The small technology transfer research is if you're partnering with a university. And so since I think most or all of you have university affiliations, you can go and talk to scientists at the university, talk about what technologies they have and see if they can solve the problems you want to solve. And partnering with a research university to get grants ups your chances of success. There are also, you know, governmental university partnerships. These helped us save tons of money. The USDA is a great partner because they're funded by Congress, so they get paid no matter what. The DOE is not as good a partner because they're a bunch of consultants that have to raise money, so they care about money. And universities are great, but sometimes they'll try and subtract value from a startup before there's value, and they'll spend a lot on IP before it's been validated. And so, you know, just a warning that universities can be great, but they can also be kind of a double-edged sword. So one of the things that we talked about a little bit when I talked about the, you know, the fashion business, and it's that there are all sorts of different ways to make money from your business. And this can be a good reason to delay taking money, because as soon as you've taken in investor money or stakeholder money, you have a boss. And if you have to pivot, it can be very painful if your investors don't trust you, and you can even get fired from your own company. And so, you know, thinking if there are, you know, apps that you could generate to make money, ads that you could use to make money, whether the company never makes money, but you just sell the company, subscriptions, you know, advertising, all these sorts of different things are ways to make money. And keeping it in mind when you try and figure out a business model is very helpful. And one of the things that I found is that, you know, no one ever really told me to map the value chain, you know, where I wanted to make an impact. And so on packaging, you know, you think, okay, the natural model is to manufacture packaging, but in fact, you know, there's advertising with packaging, there's distribution with packaging, there's licensing fees with packaging, you know, there's machinery sales and packaging. And so we could have done any of those steps. And so when you're thinking about what you want to do, or, you know, if you want to eliminate waste, what's the value chain that you're playing with? And, you know, where could you make an impact and where could you make money from it? So one of the examples is that we got a little research contract from Meat and Livestock Australia, and they pointed out that their stakeholders are ranchers, and they're a governmental organization meant to help ranchers. And so one of the things they did is they actually introduced the ranchers directly to meal kit people and convinced them to form partnerships. And so instead of getting $2 a pound, they got $20 a pound. And so, you know, perhaps your business model is actually more like a broker or, you know, like a relationship manager. And then you can get a cut from the value that you created for someone in that value chain. You know, it's not always making and selling stuff. This was a little unrelated to finances, but if you're joining teams, it's one of the things that really can bite you from finances. So I wanted to bring it up is when you're divvying up your company, standard terms are 4-year vesting, which means you issue shares. It takes you 4 years to earn them. And if you leave before the first year is up, you don't get the right to purchase your shares. So, this is going to take you a long time if you really want to build a business, and making sure all your paperwork is in place is going to be needed for raising money, and it's going to be needed for your partnerships. Putting things in writing is a good idea from the finance perspective. So just want to bring that up. And in terms of the financial model, you know, the P&L, the income statement, all of those things are great, but I really think the most important thing is to, you know, map your value chain, figure out how you're going to make money by what you're doing, and then ideally try to make money doing it, or find someone else who's making money doing something similar and either interview them or copy them. There are templates available. It sounds like you guys already have all those resources. And I think the most important thing here is that, like, just think about why you're doing this. And so, you know, if you want to make an impact, then that's great. And then figure out how you can make it so that you love your job every day while you're trying to make an impact. So if it's just, you know, if it excites you, the idea of selling your company in 2 years, find investors that want to give you money to make something you can sell in 2 years. You know, if you want to make a difference, maybe it's just getting a job at Amazon to maximize the impact. You know, maybe it's finding investors. And then, you know, if it's the type of thing where you really enjoy talking to customers, and you have something where you don't need a lot of startup capital, taking money later really keeps your options open, and you can get money on much better terms the later you take money. So just keeping that in mind in your finances is really important.
Thank you, Mike. I just want to remind everybody, all of both decks, well, and Mike, you're okay with handing out your deck too?
Yep, go for it.
Yeah, cool. All right, so both decks, links to both decks, and all of the links that are in the decks will be in your Wednesday recap email about 36 hours from now. So don't worry if you didn't catch all of that. You're going to get another run at it. Okay, Needy, you're off the hook. we're gonna put Ashley's team in the hot seat now. So let's get you unmuted, Ashley. And so I think that the best way to do this thing that would be useful, because a lot of the teams did express a need for help with financials, is if we can really just simplify it to does a pencil out? Is this idea totally crazy, or can it work? And I was thinking we'll just kind of look at, well, what's the potential revenue first, and then what are the potential expenses? And Ashley, maybe you want to delegate to somebody on your team to do the math, or you can just take notes right there and we just kind of work through it. There is no objective here tonight other than walking through the process a little bit so everybody can see it and you guys can go through it again later as a team. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Yeah.
I will start off with the caveat that I don't have numbers for financials, just kind of labels of what they might be.
That's okay. That's where everybody begins. Everybody's financials begin that way. Yeah. So it's just a starting point. So you guys have a really interesting project that I very much hope succeeds. Can you tell the cohort what it is you guys are trying to do?
Thank you. Yes, I'd be happy to. And sort of like Needy, I have a short-term and a long-term vision for this idea, so I will try to distill that for you. And please ask me if there's any questions or if I leave out or leave any gaps. So what we're trying to sell to customers is a more sustainably reupholstered furniture. And the way that we're going to do this is through partnering with established independent reupholsterers who will be essentially making over a furniture that comes out of hotels that are undergoing renovation. So we've identified hotel furniture as a pretty significant waste stream right now. And we're going to leverage an established local workforce to do the work and then sell reupholstered furniture to customers.
Okay.
Is that enough information?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, so who are the customers, and what is the revenue potential, at least theoretically?
So we do know that we would be selling initially, at least online, so direct to consumers online. We know that the online furniture shopping sector is increasing, and that customers looking for sustainable home furnishings online are not having their needs met right now. So the major players in that space are Amazon and Walmart as the largest online furniture retailers in the country, and they don't offer explicitly sustainable furniture options. So when I talk about sustainable furniture, I'm talking about well, one, the frames would be considered more sustainable than having a new piece of furniture created, because you're not cutting down trees, using the new resources in that part of the process. And then as far as the sort of upholstery foam and the different materials that go into making over a chair, there are options that are non-petroleum based. So right now, a lot of upholstery foam is petroleum based and made of synthetic materials. And then the coverings, we would look to use either dead stock fabrics from the upholstery industry or something that was produced maybe regeneratively or organic cotton. And so there's some options there with how we want to define and label our sustainable furniture.
Mike or Jimmy, any questions? Hopefully leading questions.
Yeah, what are your thoughts right now of pricing and revenue? Do you have estimates?
No.
Okay.
We're able to estimate, the cost of a single piece of furniture based off of yardage and those sort of requirements, and an average for that. But I don't have I haven't done that multiplication, or don't have it in front of me.
Okay, but I mean, what I mean is, like, this is where both the top down and the grounds up approach can help, right? Just from a top down approach, what's an average piece of furniture cost on Amazon and Walmart right now? Let's say it's $500. I don't know. I'm just going to use that as a round number. If you're selling used refurbished, well, you have a ceiling. It's not going to be $500. Maybe it's 400. Maybe it's 300. So pick one of those as your revenue number. And then now you have to go through the costs. And what's your bill of materials? How much is it going to cost for you to obtain a couch or 100 couches? You're going to get 100 couches at a time, 300 couches at a time if you're refurbishing hotel couches, right? And so what's the cost of the labor to go through the upholstery? What's the cost of the material selection? So basically, because have you done bill of materials before? Have you heard of bill of materials before?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you're going to need a bill of materials for all these components that you're talking about, and that'll get you your cost. Okay. So you have your top estimate of, let's just say $300 each to your bill of materials. Is there enough margins when you put the two together that's make it worthwhile for you to pursue this? And granted, I just made those numbers off the top of my head, so I don't know what the real numbers are, but there's been cases when I've gotten a business model of my own and I'm trying to make it work, and I realize that there is no profit. that basically I'm selling each unit at a loss when I add it all together. And I'm just staring at that spreadsheet going like, why did I just waste 3 months trying to prop up this business when every sale is a loss on my books, right? You want to try to get to that point as soon as you possibly can, because that changes your business model.
Yeah, I think the logistics on this, you know, like one of the things that I've really noticed with buying stuff from IKEA versus Amazon is if you go to IKEA, it's a lot cheaper. But if you buy stuff from Amazon, it's a lot cheaper. And it's because Amazon has this massive like logistics investment. And yeah, taking in bespoke products and then making them, you know, individually is really hard. You know, like I'm a guy who just thinks commoditization all the time, but you have a lot of value here. And so like, I think your business model is viable if you can really get like a premium for it. But, you know, there's a lot of stuff on Amazon that is very inexpensive that has, you know, like sustainability claims. And so it would be, you know, if you could figure out a way to, you know, sell your things at a premium because of the sustainability early in the days, I think would be the big like question in my head.
That is an opportunity. That higher end price point is something that has been validated and in the online retail furniture space as well. And to answer or respond to something you mentioned earlier, Jimmy, the furniture coming out of hotels, we're operating on the assumption that we'd be acquiring it for free, because right now hotel contractors that are responsible for completing those renovations are actually paying liquidation services to come in and take it off their hands. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, Mike, you nailed it. We have a huge question and a lot of variability to figure out whenever it comes to the transportation and logistics of furniture.
Yeah, so Ashley, what I would do when putting together a spreadsheet, and you know, and I assume you're going to be going through the numbers pretty much in detail when you have the time to do it, is to also mark that that's just an assumption. And to me, whenever I do one of those spreadsheet exercises, I always try to star where this is an assumption. I have to go and validate this assumption. I have to go and validate because, yeah, you can assume that it's zero, but you might find that, I don't know, quality is horrible. You got to throw away 50% of it. All right, well, instead of getting 100, now you're only getting 50. How does that change your output on the other side? So that's why whenever I do one of these exercises, I always, you know, well, like you were saying earlier with, you know, how do you go through it quickly? When I go through quickly, I always mark where am I making my assumptions? And what do I, therefore, which ones do I have to go back and revisit later?
That's great advice. I can't help but feel like this sounds familiar, like the early days of the biodiesel market, where the restaurants had to pay for their cooking oil to be hauled off. And then you had a situation where different biodiesel competitors were stealing barrels of leftover cooking oil. I think it's still happening. I don't know if they're at the point where they have to pay to take it from restaurants quite yet, but it does seem like might eventually get to that place, although you would probably have a long run before then, many years.
Yeah. How did you come up with this idea, just out of curiosity?
Well, great story, actually. There's a couch. There's a chair somewhere behind me that was gifted to me by a neighbor who had procured it from a historic hotel in downtown Pittsburgh whenever it was going out of business. And I reupholstered it and shared it on my Instagram account and got a lot of feedback saying, hey, like you should do that like professionally. And I said, there's no way that I can do this profitably. So I figured other people had the same problem and wanted to figure out what opportunities existed related to that.
Yep. Very cool.
You have a creation story that is absolute gold there, Ashley. Make sure to work that into your story.
Thank you.
All right. Does anybody in the cohort have any questions about what we just went over with Wild Flock and their business example? Or any other? Yeah, April.
Hi, so you're going to hear from me next week because I'm the speaker for next week, Crafting Your Story. But by day, I teach marketing and sustainable business. And so, Ashley, I was just going to say your description of this product and is just begging for diving into who would possibly be interested in this and what aspects of it would they be interested in, and sort of the, you know, I based on some other there was a startup competition that I was part of last year, I think, that talked about bespoke furniture, wood furniture, by setting up a network for wood carving folks and woodworking folks to do furniture. But I'm like, you know, I think the possibility of selling something like that, you know, that you described at a premium, and maybe even beefing up sustainability aspects to it, I think could hold huge potential. So market, understanding the market is, and that's what I'm going to say to all of you, right, is, you know, really having to dive into, and maybe there's a bunch of different markets. This is the time when you spend a little time kind of exploring a little way into each one to see, oh yeah, there's possibilities here, or oh no, everybody I've talked to in that area says, not interested, or I wouldn't pay for that. It's like, oh, okay, maybe we don't want to go there then. So the other thing I was just going to mention to everybody, because I know based on what Jimmy said earlier, you know, it's like, oh, really understand your market. That's marketing research. How do I do this without spending a lot of money, right? You just talk to people. You talk to people. At this point, you know, you're gathering pretty kind of casual, almost informal information, but it can help you to further understand how people are thinking about your idea, what sorts of questions they come up with, what sorts of suggestions they can make. Well, I'm not exactly sure about that, but something similar to that sounds really appealing. So all that kind of, you know, talking, just, oh my gosh, talk to people. And that's what so many students and MBA students and teams that I've talked to often are feeling a little bit shy. It's like, oh, you know, our idea is still early and it's definitely not perfect and it's not fully blown yet, grown up, and you know how, and it's just going to seem like this, you know, off the wall kind of idea. It's like, no, you got to get over that. If you want to learn about the possibilities, the potential, right, of your ideas, yeah, you know, and I like Jimmy's recommendation of, you know, if it's really hard for you to talk to people, just make it a task. Okay, I have to get through this task today. If you love talking to people, you're going to be in heaven because you need to talk to people. So next week, we're going to talk about sort of the crafting your story idea and, preview. We're going to go back to that value proposition design kind of framework as a really good starting point. So you can take a look at it this week if you are able to, and then we'll dive into that in a little more detail to try and figure out. So what kinds of insights are we gaining, and how do we put it together to sort of convey to somebody in a convincing way that we really have a good idea here. Thank you.
Good
Thanks
stuff.
for your
Thank you,
feedback, April. I'm
April.
really looking forward to hearing you speak next week.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jimmy and Mike. Do we have any other questions for our speakers? Do we have any other questions about the program? Nidhi, are you raising a hand? Okay.
Yeah, so hearing Ashley's idea as well, I feel like looking at the market itself is a big problem when you think of multiple ideas that cater to climate change. And I think like a lot of people here feel the urgency of it all, but it's okay. To give you an example, it's like public transportation in the US. Everyone feels like there's no market for it, but still we need to accomplish this so that people stop using cars, or like use cars a little less and get into public transportation. It's like no one sees the market, but it's just like has to be built. There has to be awareness about it. That's how I feel about a lot of these ideas where everyone feels there is no market. It's just like it has to be developed with a lot of education. And yeah, I mean, I feel the same for my idea too. It's hard, unclear what the market out there is. It's just like trying to create a platform so that it's just like easier for people to be more sustainable, just like public transportation would do to transportation. Yeah. I was just
Good
a thought. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, this will be the last thing I say. I got to go put my kids to sleep. But I would say like that's a lot of it is like just really deciding, you know, what you want to do, both from an impact perspective and then on a daily basis. I mean, you know, transportation is interesting, and I'm very far left, very liberal, but I've actually really started to question whether or not all this infrastructure investment into public transportation makes sense anymore with vehicle electrification. And we're spending a lot of money on light rail. And I was in Colombia and they just designated lanes on the highway to buses, and they got the same effect with zero capital investment. And electric buses would do the same thing. And so, you know, I think that the most important thing is just like, look at a spreadsheet and decide what's right. You know, if you want to fight climate change, if you want to, you know, get rid of energy in the textile industry, and, you know, and that's really going to be your passion, do it. And then try to figure out like what your passion is in that. You know, is it talking to people? Is it making a beautiful website that just brings people to sustainable retailers? Is it building the next Amazon? And I actually know a lot of people in the Seattle community who met people at Amazon as they were scaling it up. And there were a lot of expletives from both the founders, both Mackenzie and Jeff Bezos, and a lot of shouting like, you know, we're going to do this, this is going to happen, and we're going to be blanking huge. And so, you know, if you really want to make the most impact and be the next Amazon, that's what you're going to commit your life to. But if it's, you know, just like bringing community together and trying to figure out how to do it, you know, build a company that does that, and yeah, have fun. So thanks everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. And thank you, Jimmy. Both wonderful tonight. We really appreciate it. As I mentioned, follow-up will be in the Wednesday recap email. But we should have the replay for this workshop up on our YouTube channel tomorrow, probably by noon. I think it's safe to say it'll be up by noon. We're getting better at it, getting it up quicker. We would like to thank our incredible team that has made all of this possible. In particular, we have 5 people on the support team: Kelly Farmer, Marco Julie, Lisa Monroe, Morissette Alvarez, and Adam Kubota. This program would not have been possible without their incredible help. As always, if you have any questions, you can contact Xeni or I by email. You've got my phone number there. You can also hit us up on Slack. If your team is not up on Slack, please contact me. Let's find out what's going sideways there. But you should all have received invites to the workspace by now. You should have access to the Hackathon team announcements, team support channels, and your own team channel to use any way you wish. So with that, thank you everybody for bearing with this extended episode of the Hackathon workshop, and have a good night.